from Wellness Woman 40 and Beyond, and I am so excited to be with you today. I took a break, a hiatus. I wish I could say that while I took the break, I got plenty of rest, but no. I was just busy on working on another project, and finally something happened to make me say, whoa, wait a minute. Where are my priorities? I need to get back to the reason why I really do think God placed me on this earth, and that was to really work with women when it comes to exploring all the wonderful things they can do in midlife. Since I saw you last, I think I've turned 60. I think the last time I did a broadcast was right around my birthday, so I'm still 60. But I'm well into the 60s. And let me tell you, I have to say that in many ways, I would say 100% of the ways, really, this is the best time of my life. Absolutely. You begin to start letting go of some of those expectations that are crazy and unrealistic anyway. The whole idea of perfection, you know there's no such thing. You kind of like throw it out of your vocabulary. You rip it out of the page of the dictionary because you know it's not true. And you go for what works for you. And I thought that since I'm coming back for the first time in a few months, I wanted to have somebody with me that is the epitome of enjoying life at mid-age and really having a wonderful sense of humor. I have with me today MARY FRAN Bontempo. She is the author of Not Ready for Granny Panties and also the book of Dirty Words. She is a speaker and an author, and I like to say that she is the millennium's Eartha Bombeck. Now, all of you midlife people, you know who that is, right? She's so funny. MARY FRAN, welcome, welcome, welcome to the Wellness Woman Show. It's great to have you here today.
It is always such a joy for me to spend time with you, and I am so delighted that you asked me to be with you today. So thank you.
I can't imagine starting this new group of shows without you, MARY FRAN. Absolutely. And, I wanted to talk with you because over the next few shows, I'm going to be talking about changes and transitions. The changes that we experience as we grow older, changes in our bodies, of course, and changes in our lives in terms of the pace of our lives in some cases, and also changes in our humor. I know for me and some of my other girlfriends, they seem to have more of a opportunity to be a little bit more negative. We have to find a way to pull ourselves out of that, stop taking life so seriously. By this stage, we know that most things are going to pass. I mean, whatever it is, whatever you're going through, it's going to pass. When we were in our 30s, and we've talked about this before, our hair was on fire all the time. Everything was catastrophe. I have my daughters almost all in their 30s now, and everything is a hair on fire catastrophe, okay? When you get into your 40s, 50s, and 60s, my God, if our hair was on fire, we'd all be bald. You're not bald, I'm not bald. So therefore, we survived it.
We got good hair. The two of us got good hair.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Good hair, baby.
So when you think about that, what kind of advice and encouragement can you give women in midlife in terms of how to embrace this wonderful change and transition that we're going through as we begin to age?
Well, one of the things that I always say when I speak to groups of women is that we are all already change experts because our lives on both profound levels and small, just daily levels change every single day. And as you said, we're still here. We're still standing. There is pretty much nothing that hasn't been thrown at us in some form or another before, and we handled it.
Yeah.
It might not always have been pretty, but we handled it. So, it's funny because I'm at, thankfully, a point in my life where there are a lot of good things happening, but they always seem to happen all at once. Like even with that, there's none of that, let's just pace ourselves and all. And I was actually saying to my sister the other day, because I have some other things coming up, I said, if somebody told me that I had to throw a big giant bridal shower on Saturday, I would say, bring it. Just bring it. Because I've done it. It would probably make me nuts in a very, in the short term, but I've done it. And that applies to so many things. So I just tell women, think about the fact that you're already a change expert. You're here. Whatever comes next, you'll figure it out. You'll handle it. You got this.
And that's absolutely true. It's interesting because I think, first of all, women in general, myself included, we're just too hard on ourselves. We're very, very hard on ourselves. The self-language, the stuff we tell ourselves usually isn't warm and fuzzy. It's just the opposite. And if you were to take a change in terms of the kinds of things we tell ourselves, what would you advise women? Because you talk about that in Dirty Words. You talk about some of the words that signify certain things to us that don't necessarily have to. And a lot of times it has to do with changing our mindset in terms of how we encode the words of the world and how we encode certain words that we tell ourselves.
Right. Well, I think, too, that it's really important to remember that most of us have been defining ourselves in a certain way for decades. You know, if we're mothers or if we're wives or if we're whatever we are, we've been defining ourselves like that for a very long time. So the consequence of that is certain things we just have these knee-jerk reactions to. You know, like the word change. Oh, there's going to be a change. And then we immediately panic because, what's it going to be? And like you said, your hair's on fire. But if you step back and you really look at your recent experiences and where you've been and who you are now, and even more important, who you want to be, then you will find that those words that kind of set you off before, they no longer really deserve the weight that they once had. So it can be okay to let stuff go and just sort of explore things from a new perspective and just look at it like, well, let's see what this means now. Who do I want to be? Not who was I, but who do I want to be? And how does the world affect me based on that?
And that's interesting because so many of us, up to this point anyway, let's say up to this show, up to hearing this broadcast, haven't maybe necessarily pursued being what you really want to be. But let me tell you, Mary Fran and I can tell you, come on over, the water's fine.
Come to our side. Come to our side of the fence.
Come on over, the water's fine. Because it's not about whether you'll be successful at it or not, or your friends will understand it, or whatever it is. The main thing is that when you're operating in your gifting, when you're operating in whatever your passion is, and whatever it is that really turns you on, that's where your treasure lies. And your treasure can come in different ways. It doesn't necessarily have to come monetarily, although that would be great. But the reality is a treasure can come in many ways. You know, a happier life, better health, learning to love yourself more, enjoying life in a different way, being aware. How many of you have driven down the same street every single day and have never really looked at the street and where you're driving? You know, you just automatically, boom, you're there. When you are beginning to operate and pursuing your passion and really living life on your terms, it's amazing how your everyday reality changes and how much more you get out of life and how much more you recognize things that bring you joy. And I really think that being grateful for that, gratitude is important, and operating in the present, staying present, not worrying about the future, not worrying about the past, but just enjoying where you are right now in this moment in time.
I agree. And I would also add to that, don't be married in your mind to outcomes. Don't expect that if your plan, whatever it may be for this point in your life, if it doesn't work out, that it's a failure or somehow it hasn't worked out. I mean, first of all, let's be serious. How many of your plans have worked out exactly? I mean, think about the last week of your life. How many things went exactly according to plan? That's such a rarity. And when it doesn't, we change. So again, going back to that idea, we've already got this already. And when I first started on this path, and you and I are a perfect example of not being married to outcomes and our relationship, because when I first started on this path, you and I didn't know each other, and we met through some wonderfully fortuitous arrangements, and we've created this relationship that if you had told me 10 years ago, I would have said, well, that's not possible.
Right, exactly.
You know, and yet, I mean, you live on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. I mean, and yet we found so many things in common and so much beauty and joy out of just not forcing expectations and being open to what organically happens when you're not afraid anymore to just take a step down a path.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something else that I've learned about transition, that it really is all about that journey. It's not so much about the destination, because in my case, that ultimate destination will probably be when I die. So I'm not really so much into that. I'm not so much into the destination piece. I mean, if it happens, it happens. But it's all about what's happening on the journey and what happens along the journey. That's what really keeps you going if you allow yourself to be present during that time and really reaping the rewards, because each day brings something different and new if you are letting yourself be aware while you're going through that transition.
Right. And something else to explore and possibly another opportunity. I mean, when I started down this path, I started out as a newspaper columnist. So I was just sitting, typing away on my computer and hitting send, and that was the end of that. I was perfectly content. And then the internet came along and changed the publishing world. So I kind of had to change my plan, and I started the blog, the Not Ready for Granny Panties blog. But in my mind, that was it. I was just going to get rich blogging, and that was going to be the end of that. And the best laid plans, that didn't work out. But what did work out is now 2 books in a series, and speaking to women's groups and workshops and programs and things that I never, ever envisioned, because I allowed myself to be open to what was happening in the moment. And part of it was because I was clueless. I mean, let's be honest. And I think that's another thing. You have to not be afraid to be clueless. I didn't know anything about the internet. Nothing. I just went to my best friend Google and said, how do you start a blog? And just figured it out. And, you know, you have to get over that fear of looking stupid or foolish, because it's irrelevant. Nobody knows what's coming next. The world is changing so exponentially quickly that if you get over that fear and just let yourself try things, it's amazing what can fall into your lap.
Now, I know what it's about. I'm looking for my book. I saw it this morning, but you know, the little gremlins took it as usual, right? But tell us about Not Ready for Granny Panties. I love that title. Okay. What that is all about, and what made you read it. There you go. Not Ready for Granny Panties, such a funny book. Talk about how that came to be.
Well, it really started with a really dark point in my life where everything was going wrong. I mean, the internet again was taking away all my newspaper jobs. The economy was tanking. So my husband's and our family business was in jeopardy. I was turning 50, and at the time I thought that was so tragic.
Right, whatever.
Wish I could get that back again. But the worst thing was my son was in the middle of a heroin addiction. And that was far and away the worst thing that happened. But in the midst of all of that darkness, I remember talking to a friend and just in searching for some lightness, just said, oh, I'm so not ready for granny panties. And something in my head clicked, and I thought, you know, there's something there. There's something about not resigning yourself to your circumstances, whatever they might be, whether it be aging or a family issue or whatever, and not letting those circumstances define you. So then, being someone who always feels the need for lightness and humor, I tried to figure out how I could put a spin on that. And that's where the book came from. It's the subtitle is The 11 Commandments for Avoiding Granny Panties. And it basically talks to women about ways to stay out of that mental headset where you're aged and you're stuck. So that's where all that came from.
So share with us maybe 3 of your favorite commandments.
Okay, so I would say the first one that I really like is thou shalt lose control. And that goes back to, there are a couple of things that are all sort of tied together, but that goes back to that sense that we have of needing everything to be just in a row, get your ducks in a row. Right. I saw a sign, when I talk to women, I tell them this too. I saw a sign in the store one time and it said, I'm not really a control freak, but can I show you the right way to do that? And I was like, oh, somebody saw me coming. Like, God put this right in my path right at this point in time. And it's about letting go of not only your expectations, but your expectations for others, which can keep us really stuck. Yes. Your kids are going to do what they're going to do. I mean, my son is a prime example of that. And thank God he is well and healthy and everything is wonderful. But I realized during that point that I could not fix that. Yeah. So losing control of those things that we can't fix is liberating. Mm-hmm. So that's a big one. I think another one is thou shalt scare thyself, because a little bit of fear, when it's intentional and puts us in a place where we're trying new things, it's so exhilarating.
You know, that kind of fear reminds me of every single time when I go out to my swimming pool, and it's an older pool, so it has a diving board. In California, you can't have them anymore, but we have a diving board, and it's 9 feet down. And every single time when I go to jump off the diving board, I always feel like, oh, that fear on me. And then I go and do it, and it's always so exhilarating. Facing your fears and getting to the other side of it is not only exhilarating, but it is liberating, because you realize that it's never as bad as you think it's going to be. You've been liberated from that expectation of, oh, it's going to be so bad. It never is.
It never is.
No.
It never is. And I always say, you're not going to die of embarrassment. I always tell people, if you're really, really afraid to try things, go sing karaoke, especially if you can't sing. Getting up in front of a room full of people and singing when you can't sing, it's terrifying until it's really fun. So there's something about being a little kid again in that too. Like, little kids aren't really afraid to try things because they're afraid they'll look silly. They like to look silly.
Right,
and
right.
we need to get that back. It's important to get that back.
Yeah, that's funny. I've been watching reruns of Ally McBeal, because at the time when they were on, the only thing I was allowed to watch was either Nickelodeon or the Disney Channel, or one of the VHSs of the many Disney movies that came out. That was it. That was basically my daily dose of watching. And Sesame Street. So I am catching up on all the things that happened in the 90s that I didn't see. And one of it's funny show, but one of the shows was talking about her finding her song, finding that thing that makes her, feel good, even though anybody else seeing would think, what the heck is that about? I don't like that song, or what is she doing, whatever. And I think many times when you're going through change and transition, you have to find your song, that thing that kind of gives you that oomph to keep going through that transition and not care so much about what everybody else is thinking about. And I can tell you that being tied to the outcome of things, especially if you're a control freak, is what is probably one of the biggest proponents of anxiety. I am a great, everybody knows this. I suffered from a anxiety disorder, so I know all about this. And one of the things that I learned is that when you really tie yourself to that outcome, and then you also tie other people to your expectations based upon what you think should happen, it's all anxiety, because the reality is that deep down, subconsciously, that you have no control over that. There's nothing that you're going to be able to do to influence that person and make them do that kind of thing. And lots of times you have no control of what's going on in your life. So therefore, like you said, what's the point of being vested in the outcome?
Right. And I think, people think the word surrender is a bad thing. I think it means peace. Just surrender, work your plan, do what you can, do your best, be kind, be generous, be hardworking, be diligent, be all those other things. But then you got to let it go. You got to put it out there to the universe. I mean, unless you are living on an island where you are everything and the only thing, at some point you're dependent upon other people in the world or other circumstances or other events. You can't control that. So do your best and then just surrender. And it's very zen. It's very zen, but it's also very calming when you just go, yeah, well, I can't fix it.
That's right. Well, I think that right now, in this day and time, and the times that we're living in, we're all going to have to be little zen.
We need to get our zen on. We need our zen.
What about the third commandment? That's one of your favorites. You have one more.
Probably thou shalt stop shoulding thyself.
Oh my God, yes.
I mean, and we all do it. I should be doing this. Oh, I should be doing that. Oh, and then the opposite. I shouldn't.
I shouldn't.
So should tends to equal obligations, and very often they're self-inflicted obligations that we don't really need to do, but we have in our mind that for some reason we should. And then shouldn't equals denial. I shouldn't be sitting here relaxing. I shouldn't be reading the book. I shouldn't have this piece of cake. I shouldn't buy those shoes. I shouldn't. If it means anything that is smacks of self-indulgence, then we tell ourselves we shouldn't do it. And I say, change those words to must and want. I must do this. I have to do this.
Mhm.
Or I want to do it for myself or for someone else. And it's very clarifying in terms of what we have to do and what we want to do. And self-indulgence is not a bad thing.
Well, you know, that's interesting because I think that women have a problem with that. We have a problem with the idea of we're doing something we really want, we're being self-indulgent. But if you can't do it in your midlife as you age, then when can you do it? Come on now, ladies. It's not like we're going to be here for 300 years. At some point, you got to walk into what it is that you want to do. And part of the idea of change and transition is embracing that idea of doing what you want and not feeling guilty about it. You know,
most women, I think, I say this all the time, they're more comfortable as Cinderella in rags than as Cinderella in a ball gown. It's time to put on your ball gown. Put on your ball gown, girl.
Oh, well, you know, it's funny because back in the day, and you know, I make money, I work, you know, if I want to go out and buy a dress, I'll do that. But then I would feel the need to kind of sneak it in. Not just from my husband, from the kids or anything else, but they'd be like, "What you get?" In other words, you didn't get anything from me.
Where's mine?
Exactly. So sneak it in. So I found myself the other day, I went to my favorite thrift shop. That's just my therapy, my form of retail therapy, buying old stuff. I'm in the thrift shop and I buy all this stuff. It was like a bunch of stuff, $20 worth of stuff, right? And I was walking, so I put it in my backpack and I get to my house, I'm turning the key and it's like, oh my God, how am I gonna hide all this stuff in my big backpack? You know, old habits hard to break. Trying to figure out how I can hide this backpack before my husband sees it. And something else was like, girl, you work whatever. Walk in there with your backpack.
In fact, make him come into the room and take everything out and show it to him.
That's right. That's right. Here. You know, of course, he didn't get it. Look at
and that's it. Like we are the ones who are punishing ourselves.
Yes.
Through denial, where, you know, the people in our lives, my husband's the same way. I'm always trying to justify, well, you know, I had to spend this, and he's like, I don't care.
Really? It's not a big deal.
It's fine. Yeah, it's you don't have to explain everything to me.
Right.
So, you know, we're finally at a point in our lives, and this is, to me, you were saying there were some wonderful things about this age. This is one of them. You don't got to justify nothing. If you want it, do it. If you want it, get it, because you probably deserve it.
That's true. And you know what, for all of you that are in the process of doing teenagers, okay, let me tell you something from my own experience, especially if you have multiples. It really is okay at that point in time when they start questioning you about things that you're doing for yourself and why you're doing it. You can just look at them and say, because I want to.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go into a long explanation. You don't have to. I know they're bigger and they seem more intelligent and like maybe you should be discussing more things with them, but you don't ever have to explain yourself to your kids, first of all. You really don't. But teenagers, just because they're older, you can explain other things, life lessons, whatever. But what you do for you, you don't have to justify or explain. And you know what? It really, especially if you have female children, it really will help them to begin to form their own independence about what they're doing and feeling the need to explain to their future significant other every little thing that they do. The reality is that if you're with the right person, they're going to accept you for who you are, faults and all, you know, the idea that you're a shopaholic or whatever. And I think that just beginning to model that, you know, to your children as they get older, that you have a private life, that you have a life.
And you don't have to explain yourself to everybody, you know. And, you know, I do think, though, there's another thing that maybe kids need to hear in this day and age, too. And I think one of those things is because I've earned it.
Wow, yeah.
You know, I've earned it. I work hard and I've earned this. And I think that's a word that a lot of kids don't. There is that sense of, well, I want it so I can have it for younger people. Mm-hmm. But they have to know that there has to be an earning that comes along with that.
Yes.
You know, and then you can say, I earned it and I want it. And then it's good. Then it's all good. But, you know, the idea that we have to apologize for indulging ourselves is completely off base.
Yes. And I want to make sure, because we talked about Granny Panties and the Ten Commandments, I want to make sure that we talk about at least one of the dirty words from your book. What's the one dirty word?
The dirty words, the Woman's Book of Dirty Words.
Yes.
I think one of the things that that is a real dirty word that we get challenged by, believe it or not, is the word comfortable. Because we want to be comfortable, and we've earned comfortable at this point in our lives. But some of us take that word and we sink into it like it's a big giant beanbag chair, and then we can't get our big old butts out of it. So you don't want to be comfortable to the point where, and I'll talk about your dress, you don't want to be comfortable to the point where you're slovenly, where you don't care anymore, where a dirty old t-shirt and sweats is all you walk around in, and dirty sneakers. Like, you're worth more than that. You don't have to be dressed to the nines and be, wearing designer clothes, but put on a decent pair of yoga pants, cute pair of flats, and a little scarf or something. You invest in yourself enough to know that you're valuable and you deserve that. And don't get so comfortable that you don't want to try new things. And that's back to the whole scare thyself thing, because when we get too comfortable, we stop learning. We don't try things. We don't experiment. And you can fail. It's okay. It won't be the first time. I'm pretty sure.
You know what? As you age, if you stop learning, if you stop trying new things, if you stop stretching yourself, then that is when you really start to age.
That's when you put those mental granny panties on and you're stuck in them.
And Mary Fran, you're definitely not ready for granny panties.
I am not. I will go down kicking and screaming.
I just had this visual. No, that's what I want. No. Mary Fran, thanks so much for being on our debut relaunch show of the Wellness Woman Show. It's so wonderful to have you, and I just love you to death. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel the same way about you, and I'm always delighted. I always say to you, you ask, I'm there. Anything you want.
And please give everybody your website address, and what are you going to be doing over the next few months?
It's MaryFranBontempo.com. We are putting together workshops, and hopefully an online program will be coming soon. So we're doing that. Lots more speaking engagements and things. So I'm ubiquitous. God help the world. I'm everywhere.
Yes. Mid-age women unite.
Woo!
And for those of you who want to see the show again, you're watching it live, you can go to New Earth Television.com. Thank you, Rachel, my producer, and her wonderful network that features women doing things. And also visit me on my website, wellnesswoman40.com. Brand new URL, wellnesswoman40.com. You can see my shows there. You can see my magazine there. And you can do a direct link to my online class called Distress the Mess. Basically finding ways to get rid of the stress in your life and to increase the joy. So, thanks so much for tuning in. It's been wonderful to have you. This is Lynnis from Wellness Woman 40. We'll see you again next time.